Well, most of us think that peace is the absence of conflict. The reality is that peace requires relationships, which, as most of us know, are full of conflict, big and small. Our speaker today, John Schuster, comes from having worked with Braver Angels since 2018, helping conservatives and liberals build understanding and relationships. His background is that he teaches leadership coaching at Columbia University. He has an MA in literature and an MA in psychology. He's had his own business for 30 plus years and author of 5 books. Now, he's previously a Columbus Rotarian, so be on your good behavior so he comes back. He left actually to move to Texas for a few years. On the fun side, he provides support to retiring professionals and takes his guitars to nursing homes to sing and encourage elders to keep growing psychologically and spiritually. He's a grandpa and a gardener. He got interested in depolarizing work in 2016 and has been working on it with Braver Angels since 2018. Please welcome to Columbus Rotary, John Schuster. Welcome, John.
Thank you so much, Nancy. It's a real privilege and honor to be here. It is neat to get back. I enjoyed my time. Ken Ackerman got me, he knew I was pretty new to town. I've been in Columbus about 11 years now. I have grandkids here. My son teaches physics up at Upper Arlington High School. And so I had the good fortune of meeting many of you, at least briefly for those 2 years, but I was traveling too much and Houston was too much in my future. So but I'm still around the Grandview and Western Columbus area a lot. That's where we moved to. So it's great to be here. It's great to be in an organization that has such a deep commitment to civility and in your DNA is this kind of communication that the four-way test is so real. And in every Rotarian meeting I've ever been to, I can sense the spirit of the marketplace and commerce is there. The spirit of collegiality is there, and the spirit of service is so much there. And so that's wonderful, and it's so needed at this time. The world and the United States needs Rotarian and that fourfold test, as you know. So, with that said, I'll start a PowerPoint in just a minute, but. And I'm probably kind of talking to the first couple of PowerPoints here. I'll tell you a little bit about my background, which is I'm not an expert in this area. I have, I've got some study I've done, but and some practice I've done as a coach and a teacher of kind of human relations, interpersonal relations, what's now called emotional intelligence. But that's different than the citizenry this is all about. But we're all amateur citizens, are we not? We're all trying to do our best, and so I come to you almost to share notes. It's like, let's share notes with each other, and not really full of answers. But I'll be glad to respond at the end if that could be of help to people too. It's a relatively short presentation, but I want to give you a little history and tell you why I'm fairly encouraged. Because I've had so many conversations with people who have different views of mine, up and down the political spectrum, but it's all been encouraging because the communication has been so respectful, and so and I was listened to, and I listened to others. So that does exist in the world, and I'm here to tell you who's doing it and that kind of thing. So let me share my screen now and get back a little bit more on script here. So. Everybody see that okay? So that's the title page there. You know that. I one of the four-way test. I thought the third one I'd highlight because it's all about goodwill and better friendship. And if anybody knows how to build social capital, it's Rotarians. And the research on social capital in the United States has not been good. It's been dropping decade by decade for a long time now, and so we're kind of reaping the benefits of this. So there are large but not all powerful forces against against the four-way test. And by large, I mean, you see the media and what's happening with this very ill will and destroy friendships and that kind of thing. You see all that, but it's not all powerful either. We have, I think our intentions and our hearts can change this, and skill and practice does help with this too. So it's not all powerful, and we can attest to that. We can each do something individually every day to make it different. So I've already told you a little bit about me here. I'll tell you about my first polarized conversation. I think it was about 2001. And I remember my son was in his 20s at the time, and I have two sons. They both are teachers. One teaches down in Lebanon. He's in Warren County, and the other one up here in Upper Arlington. So I was having a conversation with the younger one, and I could tell that there was a tension in I can't ever remember having that kind of political tension in a conversation with him. I remember I walked away from that conversation feeling like, well, I could have handled that better, obviously. He didn't feel quite safe or something. And then, fast forward a number of years, I remember in 2016 during that election process, I had my granddaughters, let's see, I guess they're both late teenagers now. They were early teenagers then. And I remember having a discussion with them. I was trying to prevent political damage from happening to their hearts and minds. I was trying to say, this campaign is so brutal. Please, I've been around many more decades than you, young women, and it's not always been this bad. It will get better someday. We will figure out how to talk to each other more. And I know I was just trying to prevent damage from happening. So those are the kind of historical things I bring to it. My more recent experiences, the ones I was telling you about earlier, that are hopeful, that have been very hopeful and encouraging, have been in small groups and one-on-one, a lot of sharing with. And I tend to lean blue, and so my opposition would be leaning red, but we've found all kinds of things to talk about. I've got a lot more purple over the last 4 years, by the way, just by talking to more conservatives and about the things that really matter to them, and not letting the media tell me what they think, but instead finding what they care about. And then more recently, I was on a phone call with Brave Angels with 5,000 people, 6 days after the Capitol intrusion. And it was the most hopeful conversation with 5,000 people from around the country in one Zoom call. It was amazing logistically. And then since then, 400 people, Ohio-wide, in the same kind of respectful, good conversations. I'll tell you more about those in just a bit. So I've had now tens of conversations, and all of them have given me hope. And I'm going to give you the bottom line kind of of the whole thing is context versus content. Some of my friends have heard me say this a lot, but what we've gotten overexcited about is content and arguing at each other with these barbs of here's what I know, look at this fact, look at this, and instead the context for the conversation, the overall atmosphere, which the four-way test is so into protecting, the context has been undervalued, and the context is the message in many ways. And so it's not what you say, but how you say it. We all know that. We've heard that since we were little kids. That's Dale Carnegie stuff. But we're not paying attention to the context enough. And I'll get off my soapbox here in just a minute. But if we would only pay attention to that, that's when things would happen better for all of us. So there's big lessons from our history here, if you know this. And Braver Angels, the organization I know so well for the last couple of years, really started as Better Angels. That name had already been taken, so we changed it. But it takes some courage to also get to our Better Angels. And this is Lincoln's famous 1861 address, with malice towards none, with charity towards all. Civil War, and he's trying to say the Union will hold. He says to people, the Union will hold in these very probably overly optimistic early days. It got darker and darker as the carnage went on and on. But he says, when again touched, as surely they will be by the better angels of our nature. And it's almost like if you could picture, we've seen this many times, the little devil on one shoulder and the little angel on the other shoulder. There's your better angel. And they're fighting it out within us. It's the great old Indian story, which probably many of you heard. The grandpa Indian is telling the young Indian brave, there's two wolves of our nature that fight it out, and it fights it out in each of us. And the young brave says to his grandpa, well, who's going to win? And he said, the one you feed, the one you feed. So that famous story of if we feed the devil, we'll get plenty of that. That'll win. That'll pull us into lots of things, kind of directions we don't want to go. So with the better angels, and of course Lincoln found an amazing way to say that again and again, and was such a powerful force for union, and his memory, of course, is built around that legacy. So I'm going to give you a little bit of data from a few years ago. I chose a few years ago on purpose because it's so heated right now. Things are so fluid with the intensity of the last 6 weeks here that, and since the election, since the campaign, all that kind of stuff. So back at Hidden Tribes report was the name of the report, 2018, surveyed 8,000 American citizens. Divide them into 7 groups, far left, far right, and in between. The middle is 56%. Now you could say it's 50, who knows what it is now, but it's an exhausted majority. And that's the people I find. I find people saying, I'm not fully represented by any position right now, by any party. There's part of me that's, so as someone leaning blue, I've had my own business for 38 years. That I'm a capitalist. I'm a proud capitalist. I try to spread capitalism around, employee ownership and all these things. Try to empower people to understand what this wonderful marketplace is. So that's an example of how we get exhausted by this, our side not, quote, representing us, but we sometimes have a binary choice. The more extreme someone's position on either side, the more they exaggerate the positions of people on the other side. All right, so you see that happen. And so those are just a few of the little data points I want us to keep in mind that we can forget about when we're bombarded by the media. The citizens can and they do need to turn to each other right now and not let the the polarized and stay away from the polarizing industry. I'm afraid that's what's happened now. I heard that phrase the other day, and we are all victims of that now, and we're sowing what we've reaped here. So let me tell you a little story now, a little background story. This is before Braver Angels, the organization I'll tell you about in just a minute, but in 2017, 2 friends got together after the Hillary and Trump campaign, and President Trump won. They got together twice because they got thinking, well, should we have a discussion between some blues and reds here and just try to keep some goodwill going? So they had their 2 meetings, and they said, oh, well, why don't you invite 3 friends, I'll invite 3 friends, and we'll have some meetings. And so we've had those 2 friends had 8 2-hour meetings. Since that first one over the course of a year and a half. And it's reported they're going to meet again later on this month. And all kinds of good things happened at that meeting. So we just followed some of those rules of engagement. And the first thing, like we said, let's get to know each other as people first before we start sharing ideas. And during those 7 meetings, we took on immigration and abortion. And we took on the toughest issues that we could find. And we found common ground. We found ways to talk about them. And the interesting thing about these discussions is you don't change your view, and the reason we held the meeting was not to change anybody's position. It was just to, listen. But what you do is you change your view of the other side. You say, oh, look at that. These are human beings. These are citizens. They like talking. They have a lot of the same goals I have. So you don't change your position necessarily. That might come later. I maybe change more than most because I've read a lot of think tank where the policy work is really rich, and that's helped me change some. But you certainly change your view of the other side. Then one of those guys found the organization that was spreading and amplifying this, and that was where there's braverangels.org. That's what you want to go check out if you want to. They're the ones who were in the Dispatch recently and found some front page press there on the meetings, and they had the 5,000 people in the one Zoom call on January 12th. They had 3 two-way dialogues. It was really outstanding. They had a Muslim and a Christian 2 gentlemen from Lebanon, Ohio, because by the way, Braver Angels started in Lebanon. That was their first workshop. And these guys they would have never met each other, a blue and a red. They visited each other's places of worship. They've become friends, and we've never done it were it not for that organization saying reach out, extend beyond. Then they had a black woman who with the blue leaning, a Hispanic man from California who's a strong conservative. They had a conversation, and then they had the former governor of Utah and they had the who's 12-year red governor from Utah, Republican, and a 2-year congressman from Minnesota, and they had a great conversation. And the two questions they asked him were, how did you experience January 6th, and how do we move ahead? Anyway, 5,000 people got inspired and moved by the feeling that came out of that meeting. So that's just what I wanted to tell you. The 400 people was more local. I'll tell you a little about that in just a bit. One of the phrases from that that meeting was, "Our solutions are not under a dome." I so liked that comment, that instead we as we as citizens have to talk to each other. That's what it's all about. How can we talk to each other and not be mediated? And I thought that was what, of course, Rotary is all about. Here's what the workshops at Brave Angels looked like. This is pre-COVID, of course. And now it's been over Zoom. So we'll see, we maybe get to go back to those kind of meetings at someday soon. But it's grown because of the internet, not in spite of it. And so that's what it looks like. So a few more ideas and thoughts here. I'm going to check out my time and make sure I'm doing okay with time, and then we'll do some little bit of Q&R, question and response, not an answer. So we need patriotic and human empathy. We lead with the person first. Tell me about your experience, how you got there. That is so much, so helpful. Like there was one highly conservative group. This is in Braver Angels. It's that little blue-red group we had earlier that's still going on. Oh, by the way, those two guys that went out, the two guys that went out to start the little blue-red, I was one of them. I just tried to create a little third-person narrative there. So one of those guys was really conservative. And then you found out the family he came from was even farther religiously conservative, and so you think, wow, this guy's moved a lot in his life. You would never have known that, if you wouldn't have known his story. So there was a lot of respect for how far he had come and changed himself into the person he wanted to be through his own thinking and being true to his conservative roots at the same time. So that's why tell your experience is so important. And then humility can do a lot with stereotypes. So one of the exercises is, how's the other side stereotype you? What's the kernel of truth in that stereotype? Oh, okay, there's a little kernel of truth in there, I understand. Okay, well, that's when people hear your humility saying, okay, so some of us are like that. Or what self-critique can do. When you hear the other side say, well, here's what we hold. We believe these principles and these policies will work. And then you say, well, what's the weakness of that policy? And they can state the weakness of the policy. It's a totally different conversation when you see people reflecting and self-critiquing and using some humility. What listening and tone and not interrupting can do, so fundamental. And George Bernard Shaw, the great playwright, said, in the right key, one can say anything. This is an interesting quote. In the right key, one can say anything. In the wrong key, nothing. The delicate part is the establishment of the key. The key is the context. And that's what we've lost with all this cynicism and all the other things I could say has pervaded our communication airwaves. Okay. So we recommend to people they start with themselves and start with your like-minded friends. You think like-minded? Why would I want to talk? Well, it doesn't take long for me and my group of blue friends. All right. We see the little dial right here. See the little dial on my hand there, a little dial. We'll be talking about an issue, and it doesn't take much to be curious and saying, well, I wonder what information, to go from curiosity to starting to put people down. Well, where'd they get that idea? Well, they're not looking for the right, and pretty soon you just turn that dial, quarter turn, and you've gone from understanding to ridicule, dismissiveness. And the worst is the contempt part. That's when you question people's motives. You say they obviously have bad motives for this. It's greed, no, it's hatred, no, all these things. So ridicule, dismissiveness, contempt. That's the dial. So we can all do this. It starts very close to home. The person in the mirror. That great American poet Michael Jackson said that. I'm looking at the person in the mirror. I'll give you a little more. There's a little more other high-level quote from a guy who wrote I'd say pop culture was that one, but this would be a high-level playwright who said, listen to the words here. He's talking about what are we going to do in these times? And he says, his name's Christopher Fry. He says, thank God we are alive when wrong rises up to meet us everywhere. Isn't that a terrible line? Thank God we're alive when wrong rises up to meet us everywhere. What's he mean by that? Never to leave us. This wrong isn't going to leave us until humanity has taken the longest stride of soul it's ever taken. Listen to that stride of soul. There's a spiritual element to all of this that Lincoln had. Lincoln knew it. Lincoln was half preacher, half half president. And Rotary is the same way. You've got this moral and ethical piece, but there's an element underneath that of deep human caring and deep human possibility. And I'm going to mention final thing. Some of you may not be interested in this, but I think we should be as Americans. America is a role model for the rest of the world with plurality. We know we're the only big democracy with this much diversity, and we've had diversity challenges ever since we started, right? But all this racial equity question and stuff that's in the air right now, we're kind of the role model for the rest of the world. If we can figure it out, the rest of the world can figure it out. I think, that's what our position has been. So we have work to do here, not just for us ourselves, but for the global community at large. And I think we got to keep that in mind. I get very inspired by that. And what's the stride of soul we're going to take. So I'm done with my part now. I'll do a Q&A, or at least a response if anybody would want to do that. So I'll turn my.
Great. Thanks, John. Anybody have any questions? Pop up your hand and I'll call on you. Joanne?
Hey, John, nice to see you. Thanks so much for being here. Good to see you again.
Thanks, Joanne.
A challenge. I happen to be a Facebook person. I like to put stuff on Facebook, and I tend to be a positive person when it comes to that stuff. Even after the election and everything is over with, I still see people who are friends of mine being extremely negative and cynical about, well, we all know, I mean, whether it's in person or on Facebook or whatever. Do you have any tips? And I heard what you said about tone and so forth, which that then requires picking up the phone, not doing it, in a private message or an email, whatever. How do you have any suggestions on how do you start the conversation to just kindly say to someone, the best way for us to move forward is to let go of the past and stop complaining about what happened and stop finding out or stop talking about what's negative from the past and what's going on now? Any suggestions on how do you even approach that with people that are friends? And I can be pretty straight with friends, but I don't want to offend, and I don't want, you know what I mean? How do you approach that?
Well, you've got the right spirit of it, Joanne, which is you want to do the right thing. So it always starts with that. It may not work. And when it doesn't work, you'll know how to back off, not let things escalate. There's all kinds of research on what makes for happy marriages here, Joanne. and there's the marriage therapist has designed a lot of the work behind Braver Angels, because he's seen people come in at loggerheads and he uses those. But well, the first thing to do is listen. So if you picture a volleyball, so here comes somebody spikes the ball at your team. Now the first thing you have to do is pop it back up. So you bounce it up into the air, you let it float around, and you say, and you stop the attack. So you say, oh, I can see I can see you're very intense about that. So you do some empathy. I'm listening. You acknowledge, yeah, it's a very important issue. I really get what that's about. Braver Angels then teaches something called the pivot. And the pivot is saying, can I offer another point of view here? See the advertisement? So you kind of let them think about, oh, I'm not, and then you maybe can say what you want to say. But the thing of this, the spike comes at you stop it, you bounce it, you acknowledge, you integrate it, which is what the second hit of volleyball. The second hit of volleyball pops, you get 3 hits. The second hit is the one that sets up your turn to hit back, all right? So don't try to bat back. We have all this stuff going back. The context is gone. You can't, that doesn't do anything.
Right. That's good. Thank you. Great advice. Thank you.
You're welcome, and good luck to you. It's worth doing. The sadness of much of this is people have lost family connections. When I went to my first meetings and heard what was going on at the dinner table, there's actually been research on that millions of hours, millions and millions of hours of friendly bipartisan disagreement has been lost because families at Thanksgiving decide we can't talk about this. So you don't have a fight, but you also don't have that wonderful sharing of ideas. And Uncle Joe there, I like Uncle Joe. Look, he's got a different point of me. Well, look what's been lost with all that. So I loved what you're trying to do there.
All right, John. So we've got John Mariotti, then Rick Studer, then Ken Ackerman. John Mariotti, you're muted, buddy.
Like lots of people, I'm troubled by the racial crisis because it seems to be almost intractable because it's backed by rage and accumulated hurt from years and a century or more of behavior that can't be undone. How do you deal with somebody who is just so angry they don't want to, we want everything to be fixed now, but they don't even know exactly what fixed means?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, John, that's a great question, and similar to it had some similar.
Feel free to go through the garage.
Joanne's, I think. Well, I'm fortunate enough to work on one of the consulting firms I worked at has a racial equity committee, and so I've seen a lot of what the business world is trying to do with clients with this question. And again, John, as much as I know what you're saying about the reality of so much frustration, I think I see lots of mature, this is my experience. I can't say that what you're saying is untrue, but I see lots of mature responses to what's going on in terms of taking positive steps forward. Now that's in the business world. And that's the world probably I spend the most time in, but there's a couple of wonderful African-American friends I have in Braver Angels, and they're really great to talk to. They know that how it begins, and I know a conservative African-American gentleman who's pretty high up in our little local group, and he's very concerned about racial equity and yet has a conservative point of view. So in other words, I don't see it as insurmountable, I guess, because I see enough healthy resources in these different communities that can uplift or at least do work that sets us off in the right direction. But that's a very vague answer, John. I wish I had a better response to that.
Rick Studer.
Why don't you skip to Ken's questions first? Because I think it's more relevant than mine.
Okay. Ken Ackerman. Ken asked, what can we do as a club to promote civility in our community?
Well, I think you're probably already doing it. I don't know what programs you have. I saw the Peace Builders thing that I tried to get to one of those on a Sunday. I couldn't make it. But I think you probably already have programs that way. I think the marketplace is a natural place for Rotarians to go because of your strong professional and business know-how. Those communities need strong, healthy voices from the leaders that you are, who know a lot about the community, to openly pursue the notion of civil discourse. And but I would also say, Ken, that it's so interesting to me. It starts with me. So much of this work is, have I really checked in my own heart? Where am I sloppy every day? And I'll find myself in the shower someday thinking about some news thing I saw yesterday, and I have this little cynical little commentary going on in my head. Well, what about doing it? And I hear this little voice in my head say, where'd that voice come from? And it's me putting down some senator who just did something stupid, or the put down is the bad part. We tend to not understand that there's a little part inside of us, that little devil over there is always saying, yeah, let's go show that. And that's the enemy. Start with that enemy first. When you can get your heart into every conversation, then you can do no wrong. You can go anywhere.
Very good. Scott Whitlock.
Go to high schools too. That's the other thing I'd say. Start with high school. You're already doing that. Go ahead, Scott.
Well, Scott was here and I don't see him now. Anne Marie, do you have a question?
Yes. Would it be a good idea to start with members of my own Rotary to try to get certain people to have a small conversation and find out where we stand, and then try to branch out, bring friends in? Would that be a good way to start?
You know, I'd start small. Yeah, I started with a buddy. That was me. I talked to a buddy. We had 2 meetings in 2017. We invited 3 each. We were a little scared. We were wondering what would happen. It was great from the get. So yes, start.
Right, because I think just talking to my friends, it's amazing what you find out, you know. And we're so afraid to, say anything, but you have to talk up.
I think so. Share, and if you know you'll be listened to, then if you know you'll be listened to, it's easier to share.
Right, thank you.
So it looks like Tom Carlisi's asking, make sure you share your contact information, John, in case anybody wants to get a hold of you. So let's make sure we share that with Scott Brown, and we can.
Somebody put that in the chat. Nancy, I think, did, right? So it's in the chat there, everybody.
Got it. Perfect.
What was Rick Studer's question?
And then John, looks like George Kuhn's asking, it's great to hear that what you're saying and doing. What are the Braver Angels goals and next steps for 2021? And what maybe we may be able to follow and get involved with?
Well, yeah, well, there's a great local alliance right here in Columbus. So contact me for that if you want. There's a couple of other of my colleagues here on the phone call or on this Zoom call with us. They're experiencing this. I could refer you to them too as well, but let's just make that easy right now. So the locally right here in Columbus, I work locally but I pay attention to the national meetings because they'll put on national meetings. So I went to a debate on the facts. How do we determine the facts? So you go to braverangels.org and you can see what the national events are, get a flavor for it, see if you like it. And there's state level work. We have a state volunteer coordinator, 92% volunteer from what I hear. And lots of ways to get involved. Basically just be a good participant. The mission is to depolarize, and there is definitely, I wish I was a more strategic level. I could tell you what the 2021 goals are, like you're served to change lives. There's definitely some vision for this group long-term, but because we didn't get here overnight. So Braver Angels is not here as an overnight fix. It's here and started in 2017. The first workshop was in 2017, I believe, down in Lebanon. So it's not been around long.
Yep. Scott Whitlock, to see you again. Did you want to ask a question?
No, Chip. I'm just listening. But
Okay.
I guess I will ask a question that occurs to me. To what extent are some with more extreme viewpoints getting involved with Braver Angels?
That I wish I knew more about. I can tell you that they can get involved as long as they stay civil in our meetings, and so, but I don't think the most extremes want much dialogue. They'd rather be oppositional, and so they can do what they want. But we certainly have some, I would say, strong opinions, and then some more moderate ones.
Just saw another note, Nancy Dayakar, to everyone, use the respect communication guidelines from the Kaleidoscope Institute was a recommendation. So I think anything we can do to improve our communications makes sense.
Well, I'll give you one other couple little things here. One of my friends, Michael Taggart from Brave Angels, he says, be less furious and more curious. That's a great tagline. And the 2 ears, 1 mouth, 2 ears, 1 mouth, or the wait. Do you ever hear wait? Why am I talking? There's all these little things that we can use.
So John, I had a question. So what percentage of this challenge do you think is the media helping stir the pot, whether that be direct media, TV, newspaper, radio, whatever, or social media that's creating this vortex versus just human nature and issues and challenges? What do you think the media's role is to try to?
Well, yeah, and we are the media now too, are we not? You know,
Right, that's the problem. As
so
Joanne
it's so
said.
fascinating. I do think there's been a long trail of, news becoming a product, and then as soon as it became a product, then it had the commercialization piece. So there's no question that the mainstream industry of media has participated in this. You have to work hard to find a neutral place. I know a lot of people who watch both sides so they can, feel like, okay, I see what's going on. I do think the social media has been, really intense about it, but a percentage would be something far beyond what I could
Sure.
come up with, yeah.
Cool. So Rick had another question. We're in every Columbus middle school and high school, so he's going to reach out to you to talk about collaboration. So I think that's a great idea, particularly with our service above. So Tricia has a question.
I've been talking a lot one-on-one. I love this concept of the braver angels. I feel like so much of what's been going on has been institutional driven. It's and I'm not saying Rotary, but we're gonna talk to the schools, or we're gonna talk to this group, and I believe that part of what has happened is we've gotten away from one-on-one conversations where you can understand the other person's point of view. And I've been, in some ways, COVID and this internet and Zoom has put me over the last year in contact with a lot of people who are much more diverse than I am. And I've taken some online classes where I've been the only white person in the room, and I have felt intimidated in that room. And yet then I've come out and addressed those fears one-on-one with someone. And I was just in a room not too long ago with a bunch of people, particularly women who were over 50, and this young woman who was, 18 years old or younger. She was as different from all of us as she possibly could be. And she was scared to be in that room, but she admitted that.
Scholarship.
She admitted that. And I don't know, I just think there's something really special within this whole issue of the braver angels and the one-on-one conversations. And John, I really like your opinion on one-on-one versus institutional.
Well, I could have said, I was tempted to say when Anna Marie asked her question about small groups, I would even suggest if you want some practice, remember I said skill and practice help. Get your heart in the right place, then skill and practice. There's nothing better than one-on-one to practice the skills. And there's a template for one-on-one conversation that Braver Angels uses to give to people. So you can follow this template. And Michael Taggart, I think, might be on the call right now, the Zoom call. He helped put that together because he was so convinced that one-on-one is where this starts, and that's the art that has been lost. So Tricia, you're right on it. Michael, kudos to you for giving us a powerful first step. Start with your heart and your own skills, reach out to one person, then you can get ready for bigger groups. And if you want to do that, like the picture I showed you of what the groups look like.
John, just really quickly, there's
That's Michael.
There's a link at the Braver Angels website that you can click, and it gives you those templates, and you can actually use that as the start for the conversation. The other thing is that you could send an email to Braver Angels Columbus and get some information about arranging for a discussion locally.
Very good.
Thank you.
Put your contact information in too if you want, Michael.
Okay.
Thanks for chiming in. Kind of invited you there.
So John, I really appreciate you. We probably could talk about this topic all afternoon, but I appreciate you coming and sharing. Nancy, thanks for inviting him. Michael, glad you were able to join us as well. We will continue to do our best to spread peace and goodwill throughout the community, and we'll look for maybe some partnering opportunities, as Rick asked, as we go forward. So thank you again.
My pleasure.
Everyone have a great, safe week. Enjoy the snow if you can, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thanks, Chip.